reflect the unseen. They don't reflect the ability to interact with the unseen. So, those who want to maintain on this journey, maintain themselves on this journey, and not try to see it in terms of just stages, a mechanical progression of stages. They have to really convince themselves and be prepared to enter into a different realm. And even though questioning is required, it's a good form of questioning is required. Nevertheless, it's something that you embark upon because you are certain of the truth inherent in this journey. If you're not certain of the truth, if you don't think this is veracious in any way, then I don't think you can stay through the course, as it were. And this is, as I said, is true in all spiritual paths. There's a certain presumption made by the writer, by the teacher, by the master, that the people who are listening, the people who want to become engaged with this, are those who have recognized the truth of the unseen. And the first stage is to do with that. It's the first stage of these 10 stages of the passage of the Wayfarer is to do with that. It is to leave behind the shore which you felt very comfortable and secure in, and embark on this journey. Sometimes you look back to see that you're not too far from the shore and that you may want to return. But by the time you got to the 10th gate or the 10th door of the first stage, you should not be looking back anymore. You should have basically cut the umbilical cord that anchored you in the world of the material and the world of the physical. And once you have reached the end of door 10, stage 1, several things can happen. Either you're content with that, and you accept that there is this realm which you are sure of, but you may not want to explore it anymore. You may not want to venture further. And if that's the case, then you stay where you are. And many people, I think the vast majority of people, they don't drop out. They are content with that. This stage that we're in now, the second passage, is in fact the true beginning, I think, of the journey. And I won't say the common person or the common man or woman, but generally those who have average proclivities, because this requires a taste and requires a commitment, both. It's insufficient to say that it's something that you just commit to by action. It's something that you want to immerse yourself into. So the second stage, the second manzil, is what the master calls the manzil abwab, or the gateways. So these are the real gateways, not those of the first stage. And here, I think, you are committed. Now, how far you can go, how far you can progress, is really a function of your own preparedness and your own predilection to this. Preparedness is really a critical requirement. It's a critical quality. If you're not prepared, if you don't find yourself in a position where you are absolutely sure that you have this predilection, then you will stay in the first stage. The master talks about the first door of the second stage of the gateways is the door of what he calls huzn, which means sorrow, but really it's not sorrow in the sense you are regretful about something, or you think that you have missed out on something. It is a kind of sense that you have overlooked the obvious, as it were. There's an obvious reality out there, and you have spent your entire life either ignoring it or bypassing it, or merely sensing it rather than immersing yourself in it. So the door of sorrow, as it were, is a very significant quality to be in. The sense of feeling of a kind of quiet remorse that you have missed out on this immense vista because of your concern with the material, the here and now, as it were. Now, how does this quality come when you have embarked on this, whether it comes at the beginning, the middle, or the end of this gateway? It's really not really material where it fits in, but it is significant that this state is experienced. If you are true to yourself and true to the commitment to reaching along this path, which ends, as I said, in the recognition that all is one. Beginning is one and the end is one. So Khawaja Ansari talks about this state as being, again, he categorizes, as it were, the degree of intensity of this state of remorse. The remorse that you have overlooked this universe, and that you have not given it its due. And generally in the classical treatises, this remorse is usually divided in three categories. The remorse of the common wayfarer, and the remorse of the elect, and the remorse of the elect of the elect. Here, I think you have to be clear again where you fit into this range, into this category. Whether your remorse is that of simply regretfulness that you missed out on this world, or it's a remorse that is to do with a sense that you have not allowed yourself the right and the privilege to be in the proximity of the one, or regretfulness that now that you are aware of the one, you regret the time that you have wasted in being away from the one. So all of these stages, through all the 100 stages, your referential point must be the one, must be the referential point of unicity. Not what is physical, what is material, but rather how it relates to the one, how it relates to your ability to reach, as it were, the sense of tawheed, or the sense of oneness. The second gateway, the second door in these gateways is, he calls it the door of the gateway of khawf. Now, khawf in Arabic, it's commonly rendered as fear, but I think fear is a word that is not appropriate, frankly, because it has a sense of dread, a sense of terror, and it is not what khawf implies. Khawf in this context is, I call it alert apprehension. You are alert that there is something out there, that there is some knowledge out there differently. Yeah. To them it was a kind of passage. Now the passage can be painful, physically painful. I hope not, but it can be. It can be very smooth. But it must always be a kind of very short bump on the path. So those with a pre-modern mind, there's no question about the abruptness of it. It's the modern mind that makes this dichotomy. But we have to deal with it. And dealing with it requires that we not abandon the ways that we deal with the world, but rather develop those faculties that have lain dormant too long. the door of what he calls the door of concern or ishfaq. I mean, again, I'm not too happy with this translation. In my case, I cannot see that. I cannot say that I have experienced it in the same intensity that the Sheikh talks about here. Maybe a better translation for ishfaq is what? Munia, can you help us here? Munia?
Yeah, I'm thinking. Ishfaq, you speak pity. You speak pity at the same time, pity with hope.
I call it concern. I mean, pity is the most common translation.
Yeah. But at the same time you have hope.
Agha, what do you say?
But this is from Shafaqa.
From Shafaqa.
Shafaqa means longing.
Yes, there is a positive element.
Thank you, loving. And to fear, followed by ishfaq. It's not fear of Allah or fear of the future. Is present. Shafaqat, no, it's not something to be feared. We fear what we are doing. We fear the consequences of what we let ourselves into. And actually, Allah is just love, nothing but love. You can't fear Allah. And that is shafaqat, ishfaq. It's translated as consent.
Yes, I mean the normal translation is pity, but pity again is, you think of misericordia and so on, and pitiful scenes of distress and so on. It's not that. It is, as you said, it has in it an element of love, an element of concern, and you translate that sense to others.
Concern again means that you are fearing something, you are worried, you are concerned.
Yes, it's
the stage of coming into realizing that you are loving and being loved by Allah.
It's a chain. You become, the more you remove these layers, the more the light passes through you. And the shafaqa that you have from, or the concern that you know that reality has from you, has to be manifested through you to others. So you also begin to be very indulgent in many ways about the foibles of people and the games that people play to convince themselves of their importance or their significance. And it's a kind of quiet bemusement, I would say. Concern and bemusement.
If you look at the word shafaq, what is shafaq? It's a new dawn as well. So it's as if you have pity, but you have hope with a new dawn coming. So that's how, look at it. There's something new coming. So that's how I see it. Sometimes you put something like
Sorry, deplore? No, it's not. It doesn't have that element in it. It is the common term that you use in daily discourse is pity. You pity somebody. You see a pitiful sight. There's a pitiful scene. This is though again when you transpose it to the different. We have to learn also different vocabulary. They're the same words, but they have different intensities when they apply in different arenas. The language itself is not only Arabic, but nearly every language in the world is deteriorated because words have changed their meaning. And they are used to describe things that are no longer relevant in the spiritual sense, and they are no longer able to describe things that are important in the spiritual sense. So the shafaqa that we talk about, I think, is more a kind of recognition, and which leads us to the next one, which is you are subdued in front of the magnificence and the majesty. So that knowledge, that state, passes through you to human beings. Again, to put to try to personalize it. There's no doubt that this quality tends to increase with age, but the quality of that quality has to be nurtured. There's no doubt. And people tend to be more patient when they're older. They tend to be more resigned when they're older. But that's fine to do with the outer world. But when you're looking at the turmoil around you, the turbulence around you, you see it with a different angle. For example, we had the last 2 years, we had this Arab Spring business. And if this took place, say, 1979, 1980, when the revolution took place in Iran, or any of the momentous events of our times, the way in which I was engaged with these events was far, far more intense than it is now. The reason is not because I'm not, on the contrary, I think with age I've become probably more radical in my political thought. But when it comes to feeling very angry or upset or becoming emotionally involved, this declines with your spiritual awareness. All these events that take place, if you put them against the background of this vista, you'll find they are really just sort of blips. Now, you have to know what the underlying trends are. There's no doubt about it. You can't just go in the world outside without taking cognizance of what's going on. But you tend to put things in their proper place. For example, American elections, everybody gets hot and bothered about this or that. In the end, if you have a longer time span, you'll see that there's really very little change in terms of how much change can be affected by individuals or even by societies. So you put things in their proper perspective. I mean, Blair, who was after him? Brown, who's forgotten that man? For 3 years he was Prime Minister of this country, and who remembers it now? Who remembers Blair, apart from being a highly paid consultant? But I'm sure 10 years ago we were also, he did this and he said that and so on. So this is a form of shafaqah. I mean, you feel sorry for these people. Yesterday I was at a function where Mia was there too, where there was a number of ex-ambassadors and very senior officials in the British government who were, lords of their time. And you look at them 10, 15 years later, and they're really quite pathetic lot. So it's not that they're probably very decent, good people, but if you take them shorn of their power and their influence, you feel sorry for them because they're trying to prop themselves up and be what they were then. Things have changed, people have changed. Who remembers you anymore? So you say, well, if these people only have a glimpse, maybe they do, I don't know, of the reality that they're missing, they would not be so self-important. So this brings us to the fourth door, the example of the door of humility. And humility, again, is not to sort of bend your neck and feel subdued all the time. It is to recognize that once you hear the name of reality and Allah or God, truth, you feel immediately your ego is deflated, goes to zero. And Khawaja Ansari quotes on this door from the Quran. It says from Surah 57, Ayah 16, "Is it not time for those who believe that their hearts should grow humble at the mention of God and the truth that has been revealed?" So this is the meaning of humility in the Quranic sense. When I say in the Quranic sense, I mean in the sense of the eternal tablet that was unveiled to Adam, and from Adam to all the great prophets, and ending with Prophet Muhammad. So this is the truth. This has always been. There's only one truth. No varieties of it. It expresses itself in 1,000 billion ways. But those who see the truth from their angle, their little truth, they must know it's part of the larger truth. And when they know it's part of the larger truth, then they should be like a deflated. This is what the spiritual humility means, a deflated balloon. It doesn't mean, you can express it by going around and bent back, but hovering in corners and so on. But it doesn't mean that. The door of ikhbat or quietening the spiritual senses this time. I'm not talking about quietening of the outer limbs, because we should have left that behind in stage one. We're talking about how do you contain your spiritual agitation. But what do I mean by that? Spiritual agitation is when you want to see. It's like going into a completely new world. You want to see everything. Going to a town that has huge number of monuments and museums. You want to see them all. You have a limited time, and you rush from hither and thither. This is a kind of spiritual chaos. And in this stage, you have to quieten it down. You have to weigh it down. You have to be more, lack of a better word, methodical about it. And the method is derived when you remember that all of this, again, is a reflection or manifestation of the one. And again, here Ansari quotes from the Quran, and this is from Surah 22, Ayah 34. And give glad tidings to those who find rest in Allah. So, if you have surrendered, yielded, let's say, which is much better word. The process of yielding quietens your spiritual running around and the chaos that can come by discovering this view. The door of asceticism, zuhud. I think all of us from time to time try to be ascetic, try to model ourselves after. I don't know if you were in your youth, my youth anyway. I always thought of going off in some kind of cave or something, or I had this fanciful notion of hermits and dervishes and so on. But this is again, to some extent, it's immature or childish understanding of zuhud. But when we do without, you feel that you have done something that is spiritually rewarding, especially when you part with something that you love. Again, there are many passages in the Quran and also sayings of great men, wise men, but the Quran obviously is the eternal tablet, that you really do not gain this sense of birr, which is translated as righteousness, but it's not so much righteousness, but a kind of primordial innocence, except by giving up what you hold dear. Again, it doesn't mean you have to scatter all your wealth everywhere, but you have to learn to part with things. And this, the act of parting with things, the act of giving, the act of doing without, even when it's offered you, has in itself great therapeutic value spiritually. Zuhud, is a very famous saying of Imam Ali alayhi salam, which is, asceticism is not to own nothing. It's not to own nothing, not to own anything, but rather not have anything own you. So it's like a reverse process. If you are fortunate enough to be, or unfortunate enough to be poor or materially wealthy, or whatever, they're both mirrors of the same thing. The opposite of it can be good for you. And those, for example, who are attached to wealth or prestige or power, these are the things that they really hold dear. These are the things that their inner condition tell them is valuable. But in reality, they're valueless, because value is not in things. When you part with them, you the more you part with them, if you're attached to them, the more you are able to gain your primordial innocence. That's different from giving away and going. I don't want to question the practice of the great prophets. That is, they all relate to this. But if you are sincere about your commitment, then one of the tests is to part with what you hold dear. Part with some, not all. If you're attached to some, if you're attached to all of it, and you really want to tell, like the pharaohs were attached to it and put it in their tombs, parting with it is a very good. And usually I use that as a test of sincerity, especially those who claim that they are motivated by higher principles and so on. You can pretty soon find out what they hold dear. And if they're not prepared to part with it, then you know. And this is a test that was passed through by the great Imam Ghazali. Ghazali was the medieval theologian who became one of the greatest learned men and Sufis of his time. He was very attached to his books. I don't know if you've heard the story before. And he was a great teacher and educator and so on. And he had this famous because he wrote about it, famous spiritual crisis. He was head of the most famous school or university in Baghdad, called the Nizamiya school. And one day he was leading the prayers, and his brother, Ahmed Ghazali, who was much more of a mystic, if you want to call him, much more of a dervish, was in the congregation. And in the middle of the prayer, he stood up and shouted, "It's under the tree." Then continued the prayer. And he stood up again in the second cycle and shouted, "It's under the tree." So finally the guards in the mosque came to hold him away. But as they were holding him away, his brother, the Imam Ghazali, gave up. He gave up the prayer, turned and left the mosque and ran away. And he asked, one of them says, "Why did you do that?" He said, "When my brother was shouting under the tree, he knew that what I was thinking of while I was leading the prayer was, where did I leave my walking stick?" And so what kind of prayer leader am I, claiming that I'm leading these people into devotions and so on, while I'm thinking about, I misplaced my walking stick. So this is actually a crisis that he talks about. He gave up his posts, resigned everything, sold everything, and took the only thing he took when he went into the wilderness. This is a historical fact. And he had with him, the only thing he had with him was a donkey with this, or mule, laden with his books. And he went outside of Baghdad, maybe 2 or 3 journeys, and he spent the night under a tree, and a thief came. And he woke up and said, "I'm going to rob you." He says, "Well, fine, take all the money I have." He says, "No, I don't want your money." He says, "Take my clothes." And he says, "I don't want your clothes." He says, "Well, take anything." He says, "I don't want anything, I just want your books." He says, "Please take anything, but not these books." But the man insisted on taking his books. So he took his books, which were the most valuable attachment that he had. Years later, according to his autobiography, he was in Mecca on Hajj, or visiting on Umrah, and sees the same thief. And he knew that the thief was what we call in Arabic the green man, Khidr, that is this eternal being, eternally wandering prophet. He said, why did you want these books? He says, "Because I knew you were attached to them. And if I hadn't taken these books from you, you would never have broken the attachment that would have then blocked you from reaching your end." And he says, then he thanked him, and then Khidr disappeared. So this is the aspects of zuhud, that when Imam Ali says it's not something that you shouldn't own anything, it's that you shouldn't let anything own you.
So
just wanted to say that one of the most difficult things is to give up your attachment to your children. Because in one stage, if you didn't love your children, you'd have left them in the ditch to begin with. You wouldn't have looked after them at all. So it was your duty to look after them and love them. But then when they get older, you have to let them go. And that's, I think, it's one of the most difficult things for parents, especially women, I suppose.
Especially for mothers.
To do, yes, because that is, I think it's like a string, a string from there to there. And it's so hard to, you have to sometimes really deliberately, think, oh, I must phone so-and-so, deliberately don't. Because the only way I found the best way to deal with it is to remember when I was young, how I used to try and avoid sometimes talking to my mother. So, I mean, my mother wanted me to, she was very neat, wanted me to be her sort of support, and I didn't want to. So I tried to remember that and think, well, they might not want me to be constantly asking them where they are and how they are and so forth. So,
but again, it don't. It's a positive thing, not a negative.
yes, it's not negative.
So it's not disattachment from your children or from this world. It's attaching to a love really. Look is a positive thing. Usually they explain it in a negative way. That's not really true. That's not right.
I don't see it as
Look is certainly positive.
I don't see it as
And therefore it goes with loving even your clothes, loving this world, loving comfort.
But the attachment that you're talking about, Khadija Khanum, is it's a kind of emotional bonding.
It is.
And it has a different scale of things. You just have to reshuffle the form of attachment. When you say that you live for your children, that is you sacrifice all for them, even to their detriment. That's a kind of attachment that you must break. But I think the natural, reciprocal concern and love is absolutely.
That's okay. Just that you mustn't sort of go after them as if.
Yes, you have to understand also the cycles that
There
they're in.
was sort of a priority.
I think it's what you have as well, liberation that comes with it. You're not attached, you feel free, liberated from all this, from your monster.
Yes, this is a very profound opening. But this freedom that you get must be also channeled in the right direction. The self-discipline that is the gateway or the door that comes after. So it's again a form of spiritual self-discipline. I don't mean discipline in prayers or fasting. This is the art of discipline. Again, this should have been tackled in stage one, or even in the preliminary stages. But it is a conscious understanding that none of this can work without boundaries. These boundaries, they are boundaries. It's just true, you have limitless freedom in the inner world. But limitless freedom also has to be channeled, has to be directed, has to be constrained. And the constraint obviously is the appropriateness of your action, and whether it is within the scale of appropriate conduct. So, doing without, if it leads you sort of becoming anorexic, is ridiculous. This anything that goes beyond a certain level turns against itself. There's a famous saying, I think, everywhere. Anything that goes against the norm generates within it the seeds of its own destruction. So the via media, as it were, the middle way, is the way of self-discipline. You discipline yourself to be in balance, not discipline yourself to do all kinds of extraordinary acts. And many of the great saints and realized beings, not only in Islam but in other religions, this was expressed in the form of huge self-denial. Some of them went to ridiculous lengths. A man called Abi Sa'id al-Khair, he used to spend, according to his biographer, 20 years suspended in a well upside down at night. Now, this is not really. Another one, Saint Simon, he's sat on a pillar for 30 years or something. So these are, and invariably, the stories, the teaching stories, invariably end with them recognizing the futility of this. And in the case of Abu Sa'id al-Khair, he went the other way. He became a complete bacchanalian in his spiritual life. So this kind of toing and froing from one extreme to the other is detrimental to spiritual realization. I mean, I say realization guardedly because we're all supposed to realize, but it's just, I can't think of another word. Self-discipline, in my mind and in my understanding, is just hew to the middle way. And it is one of the most difficult ways, actually, to stay in the middle, to be always in a state of balance. I don't know if anybody has any views on self-discipline and excesses and so on.
Can I just ask something? So these various doorways, are they sequential? So one passes to one door, fulfills whatever conditions are necessary, and then goes to the next door, and then by stage 5, the idea is that you are supposed to have internalized all the prime qualities that are represented by those specific doors. Is that the idea?
Yes, I mean, this is the way in which it's written. But I don't believe it works, frankly, for the contemporary mind. Because our mind is much more organic, much more flexible. Also, we have what is known as lateral thinking. So these books, if you look at them as mechanical treatises, you think that one sequence follows the next. But we have to think of them as kind of overlapping spheres or overlapping circles that have mostly these things in them. So, to be self-disciplined, you should have experienced the sense of doing without. To be successful at doing without, you have to be. So some people put one in front of the other. I mean, for example, Qushayri puts self-discipline before doing without. Ansari puts doing without. It's really immaterial, I think. But generally they are within the circle, as it were, of the preliminary stages of the spiritual path for the Wayfarer. They also relate, I don't know if they were intended in that way, but I would like to see them related to the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there are hierarchy of names. For example, the name of knowledge, Al-Hakim, precedes action or precedes power. Will precedes action. So the hierarchy of names, and everything of course comes under the canopy of the All-Merciful. So the first, as it were, of the manifestations of the one in the many takes place when the merciful, as it were, is the feature or the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that guides and governs all the other names. And in fact, there is sanction for that, because the name that Allah calls, says He has written upon Himself mercy. So mercy precedes everything else. But in the hierarchy of names, as I said, you have to know something before you act on it. Before you act on something, you have to have the will to act on it. So some of these stages, some of these doors relate to the action of the names. So, and therefore there is a kind of gradations to them. And if they descend in a certain order, then the ascent has to generally be in the same direction. I mean, if you go down from, as I said, knowledge of things to action, to purpose, when you go up, you have to reverse it, as it were. So the way of the Wayfarer and the inner realities is in many ways the reverse of the outer realities. So sometimes they put one name, or one door ahead of another, depending on the teacher. But in my mind, I think you have to see them now as kind of a group of doors that define a certain state or a certain condition. I mean, they can lead in the end to these doors, but I don't see them as, you open the door, you go in. I see them as a number of doors, maybe some set before each other. And depending on your own predispositions, that's a very important word. It's a mail, where if you're predisposed in one direction, you have to move towards that predisposition, not against it. And you may find that one door opens up to several other doors, so you don't have to. It's not a maze there, but you have to tailor it to yourself, to your personal conditions.
But this is not what Manazil said. He said if you don't know, you pretend. You keep on pretending till you find it real. So if it's not your inclination, you have to push yourself to your...
Yes, but I think this is the preliminary stages. We're talking now at a different stage. So if you're at a stage where you don't believe, or you don't have the complete confirmation, the orthodox way is to say, well, you keep on doing it until you get certainty. I don't know. I mean, again, it depends on. There's no hard and fast rule. I think it doesn't work that way. Nassim is not here, so we cannot really discuss this with her. But the spiritual pathway requires, it's essential. It's a sine qua non that you have left all this behind. If you are still in the stage where you want to be confirmed, or where you still are as well, the beginning stage, then you have to stay there. It's like a person who is in nursery school in first grade. You can't keep on repeating the lessons of the 6th grade or your GCSEs if you're not prepared for it. So it's good. I'm not saying it's not good that you should not abandon simply because you're not certain. The fact that you're agitated is enough, but you have to know that you're still in the state of awakening and alertness. You have not yet completed that stage. So you stay there. What I'm trying to do here is to map out the way forward, and you have to fit yourself somewhere. Most people will probably be I'm not saying I'm at the end, but most people will still be at the beginning stages. But they should have a map as to where they're going. They should have to know that after this comes that, or a group of doors that lead somewhere else. Otherwise, you're on the risk of just staying put, because you have not exerted the vigilance to move on. You have to really want to do this. If you don't really want to do this, then it is not meant for you.
So what's interesting, however, you may have traveled on the journey, on the path for a certain period of time, but certain aspects, certain attributes that you're supposed to have transcended can still keep knocking your doors.
Yeah. No, of course. Yeah. I mean, again, to use an example from how many people who have studied mathematics at university level have forgotten their elementary calculus, but they're still at an advanced stage. You can be a great physicist and still not forgotten the second law of thermodynamics. Doesn't mean that you can refresh yourself, but you know that you don't go back to it. It sits there and needs a bit of jiggling. So each of these stages are really maqams that by a maqam I mean a landing zone, a platform, and you leave them behind when you move on. You don't dwell on them. If you dwell on them, then you stay in that realm, and the other doors don't open to you. They might not open to you. I have to be clear. This is not something that is experienced by everyone, but the reality of it is accessible. How you make that accessible reality true to you is a question of your concern, of course, but also a question of the intensity of your desire. And you have to have a taste for it. You have to have a taste for this kind of knowledge. And if you keep on not finding any sort of purpose to it or virtue to it and so on, then you have to really question whether this is the right pathway for you. It's not meant for you. It's not designed for anyone anyway. But it has the promise that those who persist at it will reach the end. They may reach it in a tangential way, but they will get there. Of course, the difficulty is the constant explosion of information and technologies and change that keep on throwing things at you, which you have to deflect all the time. But one of the purposes of these discourses is to see if you can develop, as it were, around you a kind of cordon sanitaire, a kind of belt, protective belt, where these things that are these changes do not thwart you or just detract from your perseverance and your commitment.
You can see stages actually in a different way. You don't have to leave the stages before. The stages are arranged because we are in the stages, not the actual stages are different from each other. But because we are in the stages, we have to do them in the stage. Let's say, like number 10 stages. The number 10 is not separate from the numbers before it. It's 10 times 1. So in number 10, 9 exists, 8 exists, 7 exists.
Absolutely.
They all are in 10.
Yes.
They are not separate things,
No, it's a thread. It's a continuous thread.
It's a continuous one gen.
Yes.
And the first gen leads you to the second gen automatically.
Absolutely.
And for instance, the names of the God that you said, they are in hierarchy. And God's attributes are the same as the essence of God. They are not in hierarchy, they are the same. But we understand them in different.
Yes, of course. I mean, they're all pulled into the one. But when they manifest themselves, they manifest them hierarchically. Now here again, it's these stages. I mean, there are 100, there can be 1,000, there can be 2. I don't know. I mean, these numbers are given in order for ease of transmission, and they're written for people who probably were with Khawaja Ansari for 20 years or 30 years. So it's for an audience that is already there or halfway there anyway. Here we're trying to see how much we can benefit from the insights of people of the 13th century. Now, the reason why we don't do that in physics, for example, or in chemistry, is because the kind of progression of material knowledge goes in a linear fashion. The spiritual path unfolds in one way. So the unfolding of it to Khawaja Ansari should be the same as for the unfolding of it now, but it manifests itself in different ways. And the trick, I think, and I don't know if we have succeeded, or anybody has succeeded in contemporary times, is to make this journey accessible. But you have to understand that this is a rarity now to find people like that, people like you, actually. It is really very rare. And I'm not saying that to praise you anyway, but in this world, to have people who are prepared to commit in a serious, sincere way to a journey which has no apparent contours is not a small thing. Not a small thing.
On the other hand, I can't help thinking that suddenly of late, I mean, when you look at the bookshelves in bookstores over the last 30 years or so in particular, there seems to have been a real explosion of the broad topic
No, there's interest, but there's no. Hassan, there's no doubt that the bookshelves are groaning with them. It's all fluff. I'm sorry to say. And if it's not fluff, they wouldn't be groaning for them. No. And you never. It's like smoking. Whoever you had the misfortune of smoking, like I did 30 years ago. It's never enough when you get one. And I'm sorry, usually when I want to sleep, I read these books. Because they're very light, light. It doesn't put me to sleep, actually. It puts me in a mood to go to sleep. So they are fluff. There are very, very few spiritually inclined works of any lasting value that I've seen in modern times. I'm sorry. And the problem is that the old ones are really inaccessible, written very obscure. No, I understand what you're saying. There's certainly a risk of spiritual recidivism, if you want to call it that. Yes, and you can drop out and feel that you're slipping back, and sometimes you are lax and indifferent and questioning and so on. Of course, the outer disciplines are necessary. There's no doubt about that, and they're necessary in their own right. Actually, you have to maintain these outer disciplines. Call them prayers, call them devotions, call them what you want, but they are a form of outer discipline designed specifically in order to reduce or minimize this chance. I think also you have to choose. We talked about that last time. I don't know if you were with us or not, but you have to really choose you have to select a path that others have trod before you, and you have to select a guide. Now, that guide and the path and the disciplines of the path are all designed to both to enhance and open, as well as to stop retreat and recidivism. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting you should follow this path, or that each one of us has his own way. I think, and we made that selection. I think you have to be committed to that within its bounds. And again, we talked about that last time. They need to maintain companionship. They need to have guide. They need to be in a physical location where these things can be expressed in a much more organized way. But this is not really the forum for that. I mean, I thought with Allah Mustafa is some dhikrs afterwards, but there are different schools and different ways of doing it, and it might be alien to some and so on. So I think you have to stick, and this should be run parallel to what I would call this teaching discourse. This is really critical, but one step forward, 2 steps back. I hope not, because by the time you end, you'll be way back. Maybe it's 1 step forward, 1 step sideways. No, this is normal. I see it as a kind of a very sort of oblique or acute spiral. It goes along like that, but it keeps on going up. So the direction has to be up.
I think that every time you think you're stepping back, you see it as a learning experience, something to do. And I'm just trying to see the meaning underlying it, and then you have more hope in there saying, oh, I'm going backwards. In fact, it could be going forwards by going backwards. That's the only way I can deal with those sorts of experiences.
Also, I mean, the mind, because it's so overdeveloped,
yeah,
and the rational factor, you have to have things to which it can latch. And
yes.
I mean, in my case, you have to sort of identify these things. And I think of the unseen, not then, not now, but as in many ways the world of meaning, the world of ideals, the world where the essence manifests itself, the essence from which all manifestations come. So, if you think of it that way, or if you begin to interact with this universe, the universe of meaning, the universe of ideas, and they have their reality, as we all know, in the entified sense. When you talk about the meaning of something, and when you talk about principles and so on, they mean something. They have a reality of their own. Transpose them to the world of the unseen. And it's a way of beginning to break this division, what the Quran calls the Marj al-Bahrain, the two oceans. But there's a bridge between them. And you have to situate yourself on that bridge. Now it can be by various call it, I don't call it auto-suggestion, but it is to do with understanding that the unseen is the opposite of the seen. Therefore, what is it in the seen world that we think of as real but is not identified? It is the world of meanings, the universe of ideas.
Yeah, I'm still struggling again, actually reading about the seen and the unseen. And in these doors, when I get stuck in one door, I then look for a meaning and form, go to another door. Eventually, I then get a meaning that the door I was stuck in, it opens up. So there is no sort of set form like this that you've got to go through. That way it wasn't working for me. So whenever I entered one door, then I quickly start to reflect and remember, and then reflect further. And if I got stuck, I just couldn't get stuck. I'll try another way. I think that works out easier. But I think this whole thing about the unseen is not easy, it's difficult.
Yes.
I'm struggling with it, the unseen.
But I mean, this is reality that we have to deal with. I mean, if you do not reverberate with it, now some have it in different stages, but every one of us has knowledge of the unseen. The question is, at what state is that knowledge? Is it latent or is it manifest? Is it early or is it developed? Is it weak or is it strong? But I don't think any one of us actually has any doubts about the reality of it. Otherwise, you would not, take off Friday evening and come here. So everything else, I think, it's like this spark that needs to be constantly nurtured. And inshallah, in time, and with time, and with intensity of engagement, these doors can open. But don't think of them as I'm stuck here, therefore I'll not go to anywhere. As you said, a very good point. If you find another door, use that. Whatever door opens, that's it. That's your door. And it might be that it's like skipping a grade. It happens. I think